What's up, everybody? You are tuning into the Founder Hour podcast. This is your co-host, Posh.
I'm Pat.
And we are here with Scott Campbell. Scott, thank you so much for inviting us to this beautiful space.
Thanks for coming. I know, I guess the listeners can't see it, but we're in a giant palatial studio right now with like marble floors. It's
the nicest studio I've seen in my life.
Just imagine Rodeo Drive.
We're on the fifth floor.
Yeah.
All my staff is on the third.
Yep.
No,
you can hear him in the background.
We're in a grimy artist studio downtown.
But the chairs we're sitting on are cool. They're comfortable.
Yeah,
so
we have
like
expensive furniture. It's a cheap space with expensive furniture.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I like that. I like that style. So I think this is gonna be a good one.
We were talking offline how to introduce yourself. So why don't you kind of tell us like the hyphenated?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't had to make business cards yet, so I don't know what I would put on them if I did. But basically,
so let's assume you are making business
if I had
cards.
to make
You're
a business
designing
card
your own business
right
card.
now, it would be tattoo artist - fine artist - drug dealer - dad. I'll just leave it. Yeah.
Great. I think that's the first time we've had those hyphens on the show.
Nice.
Yeah.
First drug dealer on the show.
First drug dealer on the show too.
Yeah, Pablo did it and then he died.
Yeah.
And so we couldn't release it soon enough. So here you are.
Yeah.
So Scott, we like to start off and take it way back, but for you it's not that way back. You're a young guy, to where it all began. So give us a little bit about young Scott, baby Scott.
Okay,
I'll give you.
So basically, I'm from Podunk, Louisiana, about 30 miles outside of New Orleans, a little town called Bayou Hermitage. Basically, my grandfather was a career military guy. He got out of the military in the 50s, spent his entire life savings on 6 square miles of swampland out in the middle of nowhere. Completely convinced he was going to discover oil on it and be rich. So he moved my grandmother out there, built a house with his hands, and never found any oil, and basically just ended up leasing out plots of land there because there was a canal that ran through it that went to the Gulf of Mexico. So he would lease out plots of land or sell plots of land to support themselves to shrimp boats and fish boats and duck hunters.
Sounds like every country song.
Yeah, basically, yeah. A lot of twang.
A lot of shrimp boats.
So my mom was born out there, I was born out there, and then went to high school and college in Texas.
Where'd you go to college?
University of Texas in Austin. And
Longhorns.
Yeah, hook 'em horns. I never graduated, so I don't know if I'm allowed to say hook 'em horns.
I mean, you could say.
I'm sure you can say.
But
what did you
anyway, biochem. Okay. So I was
like the early days of the drugs.
Yeah, I mean, I was super into science. I was like this little suburban kid trying, I was really into like the truth. Like I wanted like to find like absolute truth. I wanted, and science was kind of my path to that.
Where do you think that came from? Like that curiosity or that like seeking the truth?
I was just super into science. I was like, this is what's real. Like I wanted tangible, like quantifiable, like this is what actually matters. But then, I mean, I don't know how long this podcast is, but basically I was interning, my second year in this bacteriology lab that was doing basically any biochem stuff is either agriculturally funded or pharma funded. And I tried to stick to the agriculture side of things. Anyway, so I was working in this bacteriology lab that was studying this one type of bacteria that was growing on the leaves of plants. The professor I was working under had spent 12 years trying to define this metabolic process within this one bacteria because it was releasing a bunch of nitrogen and it was burning the leaves of the plants. Anyway, just so happened the semester I was working with him, he figured it out. He published a paper, had his he had his moment.
And for those who don't know, how was it a big deal? Like how big of a deal was
this?
It's
a big deal in, the land of the nerds. That's what you work towards. That's what I mean. I was like, oh, so if I go down this path, that's my payoff.
Right. Like getting published is
getting
the
published,
validation.
Yeah, and recognized by the community as making a significant discovery that genuinely helps, improve crops. Mm-hmm. But I just sat there and looked at it and I was like, oh shit. I don't have a 12-year attention span. I don't think that's the life for me. I like doing something every day and being like, this is what I did today, and having that, daily gratification. So So I had a midlife crisis at 19.
22.
And like dropped out of school, ran away to California, and started tattooing.
So before you get into that, I mean, that's obviously a big deal. Or maybe at the time it wasn't a big deal but for those that are listening or those that are going through something similar, and we've had a couple of folks on the podcast as well that went through the same thing of like realizing this is not for us and dropped out. But in that moment, what was your thought process? Kind of guide us through that. I know you said you just kind of dropped out and it wasn't for you, but did you have a plan?
Yeah, like were you scared? Like were you like pressured?
No, I mean, I
like,
was 19. You know what I mean? Like everything's. I started college really young. Like I started a year early, because I was pretty good at tests and I got a scholarship, and I just, I was just going to school because that's what you're supposed to do, and I was like realized that like, wait, I'm struggling to go in a direction and I don't even know if that's the right direction. But no, I literally one night met some little punk rock kid, in downtown Austin who was like, hey, I got a sister in San Francisco. We could crash at her house. I was like, great. Like rented a U-Haul truck, packed it up. And then,
your parents didn't care?
2 days later, no, I was kind of like on my own, you know what I mean? Like that's a whole nother story. But basically, this guy said he knew of a sofa in San Francisco. So I got a U-Haul, packed it up, and then he ended up bailing. He was like, my dad said he'll like pay for the rest of my school if I stay in school and don't do this. And I was like, well, fuck it. Give me your sister's address. And so I went to San Francisco and, didn't end up hooking up with her. I just lived in this U-Haul truck for 2 weeks and found an apartment, just like took that opportunity to reinvent myself, and basically just fell in with a bunch of punk rock kids and started carving pictures in their arms. And, I finally got a room in this apartment to rent, and all these people kept showing up for me to tattoo their arms, and I decided to start charging money and call it my job.
Yeah. How did you even get into tattooing in the first place? Like, were you, I mean, like,
I'd been getting a lot of tattoos. I'd always been into tattooing. Like, I love drawing.
Okay.
I had been getting a lot of tattooed even around Austin and Houston. And yeah, just was really drawn to it. Really just the freedom of it. I was like, that's a lifestyle I want. It was basically like this criminal gypsy lifestyle. So like, once I learned my ABCs and could do it proficiently, I would send a portfolio to Madrid, to the shop there, and like be like, I want to go live in Madrid. So I lived in Madrid for a year, and like, I want to go to Japan, so like reached out to people in Japan, sent my portfolio, went there, like traveled around, and then New York. And, I was resigned to just be this gypsy tattoo kid forever.
Yeah.
Until I got to New York. And then I really, New York was kind of the only place where you could sit still but still feel like you're moving. And I really fell in love with it.
And I'm assuming you're pretty good. And I'm just curious, like, how you even got to like that point. Like, I mean, growing up, when you explained like your kind of upbringing, it seemed like you were like really into science and like this kind of nerdy kid. But then you had this like creative or artsy side to you. Like, how did that come about? Were you just kind of curious and wanted to, draw or design or?
Yeah, I never thought of myself as creative when I was a kid. It's like I knew I could draw, but it was more just like a technical skill, than anything else. Like I remember being in art class and just being like, okay, today we're going to draw this. And I would draw it and people would be like, wow, that's like, how did you do that? And I was like, well, I just made it look like it looks right there.
Yeah.
And
so it's kind of like this innate ability.
Yeah, it seemed very intuitive to me. And it didn't, I never imagined myself to be an artist, until I got to New York, and I got to New York and I got to tattoo some people who really truly are like incredibly powerful creatives, and got to like put my hands on and get to know like the downtown New York art scene in the early 2000s. And I had always viewed fine art as being this like really stuffy, community of people that used big words and had much better posture than me. And I was just like, oh, I'm not invited to that party. I'm just the scumbag punk rock kid. But then as I got to connect with a lot of people who were like in art history books, I was like, oh, like these are just a bunch of scumbags who didn't fit into the world either, and they didn't choose to be artists. They just can't do anything else,
Yeah.
And so it was really kind of inspiring, and where I learned the audacity to just be like, yeah, fuck it, I'm an artist.
And was it a struggle at all? Because it sounds like it kind of things just kind of started rolling, and word of mouth kind of spread, and people started finding out about you and coming to you. But like, was it a struggle at all getting like clients, quote unquote, if you will, or just people coming to you saying like, hey, I want a tattoo?
I mean, yeah, it was. I just resigned that that's what I was going to do, and if I did 2 tattoos a week, then I had to figure out how to live off the money I made from 2 tattoos a week. And if I did 10 a day, then great, I was going to live off that. You know what I mean? It was just like there wasn't another path that I would even considered. I started tattooing when I was 19, when I just turned 20.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's been a while.
And what year were you in New York City?
I moved to New York 2001, January 2001. Yeah, New York kind of blew my mind. Like, it was really, that was an exciting chapter.
I'm curious, what gave you the mentality of, I don't want to call it, the first word that came to my mind was like carefree, but just kind of just chill about this entire situation of like being able to afford even living in New York, or
I mean, it's easy to be carefree in retrospect. You know what I mean? Like, because now we know the ending of the story. At the time, there were definitely days when I was like, "Fuck it, I wish I was a plumber or an electrician or anything but a tattoo artist," because I'm, spending my afternoon in some guy's armpit for $40.
Did you regret dropping out of school at all?
I don't regret it. I truly think that.
Well, not now, obviously, but back then, like were there times where you kind of just like, fuck, like I'm getting older, like maybe something's not working out?
I still have a bit of insecurity about dropping out. Like there was, there's part of me that's still kind of like, like I didn't do it. You know what I mean? Like I quit, and it bugs me. I interviewed a guy for a position here at Beboe a couple weeks ago who had a master's from Harvard, and that satisfied that insecurity a little bit. Just the fact that I was like, wait, you're asking me for a job?
Did he get it?
No, he didn't make it.
I figured.
But I don't regret it. Because it took me a while to realize how powerful it can be to kind of forge your own path,
right?
Even though it's it's hard and it's grueling, and you really have to get comfortable living in like the unknown. I mean, it's interesting. So we built up Beboe and just sold it, to a parent company, and it didn't realize it till I ended up in this. But like this is the first time I've ever had a job in my life. Like I'm 42, and it's the first time I've ever gotten a paycheck. My life has always been like, what's the hustle of the day? Like how much money do I need? Okay, how am I going to get it? Like what's, like even through art exhibitions where it's like, I'll have a show, sell out the show. Okay, how much money to make that? Okay, I got 6 months of income to like make another show. And like,
was that exhausting? Like looking back, was that lifestyle exhausting?
No, for sure. It's super exhausting. I mean, I, wake up at 5 a.m. every day, like feeling like my life's going to crumble. I was like, it's all going to fall apart. Like I got to run and go keep it together. It's definitely stressful, but it's super satisfying, and I'm really, I've done a lot of things I'm proud of.
And we'll definitely come back. Yeah. We'll definitely come back to like Beboe and all that stuff, but like, I kind of want to get a sense of like, from that point in your life when you're like 21, 22, and you're, kind of just getting this thing rolling, and you're kind of tattooing here and there, like how, obviously it turned out well, but like, what was kind of the highlight of your career maybe, or like that moment where you're like, because I saw that some of the folks you've worked with and worked on, and I mean, it's like the names are pretty up there, so I was like kind of curious like how that even came about. Like when was that moment where you're like, this is gonna be real?
I don't know. I mean, I think I've tattooed a lot of celebrities and fancy folks, and I don't know, it's just kind of been like a gradual building of it, like it just kind of gradually took off. I mean, it's for me, like the famous folks, I kind of, tattooed them without, like I would just notice through the public's reaction, like I tattooed Heath Ledger a bunch, and it wasn't until the third time I tattooed him that I even knew he was an actor.
Yeah.
You know, and then because he got tattooed, and the next day there were all these cameras at the studio, and I'm like, what the fuck are you like, you know? And I called him. I was like, why are there cameras here? And he's just like, oh I'm sorry, like, you know, like I just did this movie Brokeback Mountain. It's kind of a thing, and I was just like, oh, okay, got it, yeah. But to be honest, like for me, like, do you know who Raymond Pettibone is? By chance,
No.
he's this artist who did a lot of like old like Black Flag album covers and stuff.
I know Black Flag. Yeah,
but,
I've
like,
seen those.
Tattooing him was like tattooing Superman. You know, like for me. And so there were people that I was just like, holy fucking shit! Like I'm actually participating in like culture. You know, like I'm a part of something. And then tattooing Marc Jacobs was a really big one in the beginning. He to this day, he's really one of the most inspiring like creatives that I've met.
Why is that?
He just like really, he really taught me like what a creative responsibilities are to culture and to themselves, which is like he will look at everything he comes in contact with, be it a person or a painting or a song or, you know, like any work of art, any creative process. He will stand there, like really objectively take it in and give an honest emotional reaction to it. And it's easy to be like, well, yeah, that's an artist's job, is to like not prejudge, you know, but we come across so much stimulus, you know, that we judge. We do, you know, just because we need a way to like manage all this information that's being thrown at us, we make quick judgments. We're like, oh, I like that. I don't like that. I don't like this. But he will really, every person he meets, he will shake their hand and like breathe them in and like consider them. And on a level that is exhausting, but he's just so determined to not judge anything prematurely. And I just really, it really caught me off guard. I remember like one time I went to this art show with him in New York, and it was like a group show with a bunch of different artists. And there was one painting where I didn't even really look at it. I was like, oh, I don't really like that style of work. You know, I just kind of like brushed it off. And of course, he buys that painting right there on the spot. He's like, I'll take that one.
Was it because you said that?
I don't know. Like, that's what I was saying.
We'll go with that.
I was like, well, shit. Now I have to consider this whole genre of art that I had written off already. You know, it's like, I don't know if he did it to teach me a lesson or if he actually like did it.
I mean,
but I was just like, okay,
it's an expensive lesson.
I will not judge. Like, I will consider everything. But yeah, like Marc, you know, is really, I think about him a lot. And,
I feel like that's one of those moments where like everything you thought about yourself just gets like crushed because it's like, I thought I had a good eye for this stuff, and like Marc Jacobs is buying this. Like shit, I have to reconsider my whole like outlook on like art.
He has incredible taste. He has an incredible art collection. I was like, and I was like, now I have to go back and reconsider all those things I decided I didn't like.
Did you like that art piece eventually or no?
I have an appreciation for it now. Yeah, I do. But yeah, so it's like really just being exposed to that community in New York during those times really made me feel like I was a part of something that was globally relevant, and that was really exciting.
What I'm curious about, and I'm not very obviously informed about the tattoo artist community, but I see a lot of tattoo artists, especially now with Instagram. I mean, it seems like everybody wants to become a tattoo artist.
Yeah.
So what made you stand out from the noise? Because the story that you're telling seems to me like you were very humble. You just kind of were head down, just doing your thing, didn't necessarily go out of your way to promote yourself perhaps during those times. But I mean, how did that business grow? Because at the end of the day, I'm sure that made you money.
Yeah.
What did you do to grow that business?
I grew that business at a time when geography still mattered. You know, like it was before Instagram, and it was basically, you know, and again, I don't know if you want to go down this wormhole in the if you want to go down this wormhole on the podcast, but
Let's do it.
You know, like Instagram has made geography obsolete. You know, it used to be there was an LA style of tattooing, there was a New York style of tattooing, there was a European style of tattooing, there's a Japanese style, and you know, because there were these walls of communication up, there were these little bubbles that could incubate different ideas, and so in New York, you'd be like, oh, this artist would do this, and then the guy down the street would react to it, and then
you had to go there to feel it,
and so you develop a style in this. Their styles were developed geographically. Now with Instagram, geography is obsolete. So like I'll do a tattoo, and then I'll see some guy in Malaysia do a version of the tattoo I just did and post it on his and tag me in it, and then somebody else. So it's kind of this sharing ideas like globally. But I kind of came up and made a name for myself at a time when New York, downtown New York, was a community of people that were like really open and sharing ideas. It was just this like bubbling pot of weirdos that were just doing cool shit, and you had to be there to know about it. And so it was very magnetic. And the fact that I was like the tattoo artist in that community, right. I got to tattoo a lot of really incredible people and really incredible artists and, actors and everything. And so, so as far as how you make a name for yourself now in tattooing, you just get famous people to tag you on Instagram. You know what I mean? But but I feel like I was part of the last wave where geography really mattered and being in a place, meant something.
So you were more of like a New York artist, tattoo artist?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So like your style now would not be fit to LA, quote unquote?
Well, now there's no
style.
Now all styles are kind of just homogenized into, there's no New York style anymore, or LA style.
Are you still doing this?
Tattooing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tattoo like once or twice a week, mostly for friends and family. My accountant would kill me if I told him I was quitting everything else to go back to tattooing full time. But I really do love it. I'm a romantic, and I really like fall in love with people, and I love connecting with people, and just, it's really nice to, when I have people I care about going through emotional things in their life, like I have this thing I can give them and do for them, and it's really satisfying.
So when was that moment where you kind of decided like it's time to kind of move on and not do this full time and start something? Like, was it because you saw an opportunity and you wanted to start a business, or did it have more to do with tattooing itself?
I mean, to be honest, like the thing that really pulled me out of like tattooing was a broken heart. I was dating this girl for a while, and she basically left me for this like fancy fashion photographer who was just shinier and fancier. And I was like, fine. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna do tattoos. I love doing tattoos. I'm gonna keep doing tattoos.
Yeah.
And it like,
if anything, I would think it'd make you do more tattoos. Just
I
want to tattoo everybody, get my mind off this shit.
No, but it was like, I was just like, oh, like, I don't know. It planted a little seed of like in me that I wasn't enough. And I've gotten over it now, obviously, with like, but it really like pushed me on a thing where it's like, oh, I want to be more. Like I want to do more. And I'm confident in the things that I'm making, and I want them to resonate in the world further than just some scumbag's arm. Like I really want to, like, I want people's attention.
Scott, I don't want to focus on the breakup too much, but I do want to focus on the feelings that you were going through, because I feel like, a lot of times on this podcast or any other podcast or any other TV show or any other content that I've listened to, at least, we don't talk much about emotions or like what those emotions caused us to do, right? And I feel like a lot of people can relate to this. I think Scooter Braun, who is an idol of like me and Pat, always talks about like his wife and his kids and like, being a dad, and I want to definitely go into that with you as well. But in that moment, having your heart broken, what did that make you feel? I mean, what did you want to do next? What was going through your head?
Oh, it's just a horrible feeling. I mean, anybody who's had heartbreak knows, like, it's the worst. I just didn't want to ever do it again. I didn't want to ever have that. I needed to make sure that, like, okay, if I just got my heart broken because I wasn't fancy enough, or I didn't make enough money, or, like, because this person was above me because I was just a tattooer, I need to be more, because I don't ever want to feel that pain again.
Yeah.
And so that was when I first started like pushing against, pushing out of my little box. And I was like, okay, like I want to do art shows. Like I had been invited to do group shows with a lot of artists downtown that I really respected. So I started, pushing to have like solo shows, and, have had exhibitions all over the world, in various museums and, galleries. And so, it just, and as soon as it like, that was what kind of started me on that path. And then once I started doing it, I realized that, the sensitivity that I had gained and the sense of storytelling and really like the passion that I had for tattooing was very powerful when applied to things that were scalable, you know? I mean, I put a lot of heart into my tattoos, and that's one of the things I love about tattooing is that it has zero commercial value. You know, like it is only for one person. It addresses their emotional need. There is no resale value. Right. But then, you know, like when you start doing artwork, it's like, oh, like I'll sell this painting and then they'll resell that painting. And then you know, and so it's, there's a real purity to tattooing where it's like, it's just art for art's sake. And that's it.
But like you mentioned, like the scalability part is hard. Yeah. Right? Like I'm sure for most tattoo artists, if they don't have that big break and they're not like able to, I don't know, charge a bunch of money for their talent, then it's like really difficult. But even then, because now it's like your time in exchange for money, and like it's how much time do you have?
You know, I mean, I haven't, you know, but there was for a long time, like I was the most expensive tattoo artist in the world, you know, and but even at that level, you have to do everything yourself with your own hands. You know what I mean? Like it's still in a way like.
Still, you have a finite amount of time.
Yeah, you know what I mean? You have a finite amount of time and, you know, carpal tunnels is coming your way whether you like it. You know what I mean? It's like, tattooing's a tough gig. I would never recommend anyone get into tattooing, especially nowadays.
Yeah. So you kind of delved into fine art and you said you had a gallery?
No, I mean, I've shown in galleries.
You've shown in galleries? Yeah. So was it like, what kind of painting, what kind of paintings were there?
I did a lot of watercolor painting. I did a bunch of sculptures made out of cash. Like I would take bricks of cash from the treasury and carve them into different things. You know, a lot of it kind of carries the narrative and symbolism from tattooing into different mediums. But yeah, it was cool. It was really satisfying. You know, I mean, I think any tattooer kind of craves working in other mediums because, I mean, the good and bad thing about tattooing is that, you know, your canvas has an opinion. You know what I mean? So like if you have an idea halfway through a tattoo, you have to have your canvas's permission in order to do that. And that can, you know, feel stifling, you know, whereas like as a creative, you're like, fuck, I want to just like work in a medium where I can do whatever the fuck I want. I don't have to ask permission. But then at the same time with tattooing, you never have to deal with a blank canvas sitting in front of you, you know, whereas that can be one of the hardest things as an artist is like just having a blank canvas and where do I start? Yeah. With tattooing, you always have this person's story sitting in front of you to react to.
You have some direction.
You always have a seed. Yeah. And so it's pros and cons, but yeah, I really enjoy doing both, you know, working in fine art, in different mediums and tattooing as well.
And Scott, between the time that you were doing that and when you started Beboe, were there any projects that you were working on in between those times?
Yeah, tons. I mean, I think, you know, like most people in New York, you get kind of dragged into the fashion industry, but, you know, I designed bags for Louie Vuitton. I did a lot of fashion collaborations. I, you know, did a big, you know, bunch of limited edition projects with Hennessy. I worked with this brand Berluti. I worked with LVMH a lot. I don't know if you know that group.
They're a pretty big group.
Yeah. But yeah, so I've done a lot of different collaborations and kind of, you know, I kind of saw and helped tattooing grow up a bit, you know, from this like underground fringe criminal culture to all of a sudden like mainstream, you know, it's like in every mall, you know what I mean? Like you see it on fashion runways, so it's, you know, it was interesting seeing this like little underground craft that I really loved. And, you know, my career kind of like ascended with it, you know, and yeah, you know, like I did play a pretty significant hand in like,
right. Cause yeah, like I'm trying to think like, I mean, I wasn't living in the 80s, but I can imagine
you might have been.
Maybe you never know, right? No, but like in the 70s, 80s, like when you see photos and like even like in the music scene, or actually like outside of the music scene, like you don't see many people who are like,
Yeah,
and
no,
if they do have a tattoo, it's like one little tattoo, like they're not like
nobody had
full sleeve.
Like, no,
Like
it was like
it
if
was
you
not
saw
a
somebody
thing.
walking down the street with full sleeves, it was like heavy. You know,
Like
it's
you're
oh,
probably
fuck.
like
Yeah.
like you
But
went to
that's
jail at some
but
point.
it's interesting. Like when I got into cannabis. At first, I was like, "Ooh, this is going to be kind of a jump. I don't know if people are going to follow me or not." But as getting into it and now being where it is, I realized like, oh, it's the same thing
Same
as
culture.
tattooing. It's taking underground criminal culture and helping like bring it up into like mainstream. And I mean, literally, it's like we saw Beboe in the top floor of Barney's Beverly Hills. Like that's crazy. Like I
Right.
sell weed
Right?
in Barney's Beverly Hills.
I mean, I remember when so I was definitely living at the time when I was a kid, and like weed was like do not talk about it. It was like
Dude,
just
I
taboo.
mean, I grew up in Louisiana and Texas where it's a felon. Any possession is a felony offense. Like I remember getting pulled over by a cop and having to eat all the roaches out of the ashtray of my car before the cop got to the window so that he couldn't, get me for
Right.
possession.
It's like 2 rules: don't kill anyone, don't smoke weed. That's it. Do everything else.
But now to like have weed be what it is today, it's amazing. You know what I mean? Like, it's definitely like, oh, I want to be a part of that movement. Like I want to be a part of pushing that forward.
We always talk about that. Like, how did this whole thing even, like, these like phenomenons really interest me. Like how, even things that are illegal, like even like prohibition back, in the 1920s, what was it, in early 1900s, when like, there's a big group of people behind something. Like, is it almost inevitable that at some point, like it's gonna be a big market, if you will, or like how do we even think about these things, right?
Yeah, I mean, with weed, like the genie's out of the bottle. Like it's still federally illegal.
Doesn't
but
like half the country or hasn't like smoke or has
yeah,
smoke
over half the states have some cannabis program
Right.
now. Like I don't know what the count. It changes every week, but I
Yeah.
think it's like 27, 28 states
Yeah.
have legalized cannabis. So yeah, like we're well beyond that tipping point. It's just, I mean, this administration, there's a lot of fires to put out in DC. So like, I think, had things gone differently last election, like cannabis might be front and center, but there's a lot of, more urgent crises that they're dealing with.
Right. So when did you officially get into the weed business?
So my partner that I launched Beboe with is a guy named Clement Kwan, who he was the president of a company called Yoox, which I don't know if you guys are familiar.
How's that spelled?
Yoox.
Okay.
They do a lot of back-end e-commerce for most of the fashion industry.
Okay. So kind of like Shopify,
They do a lot of
but back end.
databases
and stuff like that.
They would, like for Dolce & Gabbana, they would handle all the e-commerce for Dolce & Gabbana. It would have the face of Dolce & Gabbana, but they would actually like hold inventory and do other things. So he managed that business, and then Yoox bought Net-a-Porter and like Mr. Porter and all that,
Which are big brands.
Yeah, huge. But they're editorial, consumer facing. So basically, he bought Net-a-Porter and then combined them. So now he has back end e-commerce and forward facing editorial to make this like partnership with them. And then he cashed in his chips and was like, I want to do weed. So he and I got together, and we went out to Colorado a bunch and out to California and just like looked at a lot of other businesses.
How'd you guys meet, by the way?
We met on a plane to Detroit with Tom Kartsotis, who started Shinola.
Okay.
Basically,
One of my favorite brands.
He's great. Yeah, Tom's an amazing guy.
Their watches are phenomenal.
Yeah, and when they were first getting set up in Detroit, they flew a plane load of New York weirdos out just to like check it out, like give our thoughts on what they're doing, just to kind of spread the word. And so we met on that plane, and it's like, I get on the plane, there's like 10 people, and you do the quick scan and you judge, but literally, like I did the scan and I was like, okay, nothing in common with that guy, and like Kevin, because he's just like this 6'5", very conservative looking Asian guy. I was like, okay, well, our worlds do not overlap. And of course, that's the guy I end up hanging out with the whole trip. And
going back to that art piece you were looking at.
No, don't. Every time I've judged, it bites me in the ass. Don't do it.
For the record, I've never had anybody interesting on any plane ride I've ever been on. And
I was just on a 12-hour plane ride, and I'm telling you right now, the person next to me was not very interesting.
Was not.
I need to be on better plane rides.
Yeah. But
yeah, so you said that you guys kind of got together.
There,
and
we got together.
Flew out to Colorado.
We started kind of looking at other businesses, and we were like, okay, let's find a business that has potential. We were like, let's find a vertical operation that we can buy and then do our magic sparkle sauce on the consumer facing end and just improve it. And
so you wanted to buy a farm?
Well, we wanted everything.
Okay.
We wanted
full supply chain.
We wanted, like a vertical operation.
And around what year is this?
This was 2014.
Okay.
And you're still in New York. You're living in New York.
Yeah, we were living in New York, but we were trying to figure out where we wanted to be.
Yeah.
And so then we looked at a lot of businesses, and we realized that we just started to get to know the landscape a little bit better, and saw that first of all, we realized that like we don't want to be farmers because there was a lot of industrial grows being built. A lot of it, back then, it's crazy to say back then because I was like 5 years ago.
Yeah, a lot's happened.
But back then, people who wanted to like participate in the green rush, people were like, oh shit, I need to get in on weed. What am I gonna do? They would just invest in grows. They would just like build these they would invest in these giant grow operations. And so we saw all these huge grows coming online and realized like, wait a minute, like this is just gonna be another commodity like potatoes or corn. Like when all these grows are flipped on, I don't want to be a little podunk. I don't want to be a farmer next to that. So like, and like there's gonna be a surplus of supply. So in an environment where there's a surplus of supply, the people who have the power are the ones that control the audience, or like have the confidence of the audience. So
have the demand.
Yeah. So we were like, look, like that's the part we're good at. That's the part I'm good at is like, creating a brand and telling a story and like earning people's trust.
Yeah. Building a
so
following.
And sorry to cut you out, but do you think that's proven to be true? Like, because I feel like we were talking offline, like everyone and their mom has like a CBD or like weed brand now. Like, do you think that it's still like supplies still?
Now,
or like are we getting to that point where like these farms?
For sure. I mean,
would it have been smart for you to buy a farm back then?
5 years ago when we were looking, good indoor weed was selling at like $2,500 a pound. Now it's $800 a pound.
Yeah.
So no, I'm glad I don't own a farm.
So it's gone. Yeah.
I mean, it's those guys who own the big industrial grows are doing fine.
Yeah.
But I I know what I do well, and I'm not a farmer.
Yeah.
I love the romance of the
yourself.
plant. Walking around weed farms is so intoxicating and like fun,
you have to be built for that
beautiful.
lifestyle.
It's like, it's so much fun. I mean, that's like the most romantic part of any of it is walking around those farms and just smelling it and touching it. And so it's, I was like, I wanted that, but it's, but like, I know my strengths and I know what I'm good at. And I saw like what people were putting out in the world. And it was back then, like very collegiate in taste level. And, it was just, everybody was like, how high can I get for $20? You know? And I was like, okay, like we can do something a little more grown up than that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we realized that we needed to build a business that relied on our strengths and outsourced our weaknesses. So we just did branding, marketing, and quality control, and worked with different farms and suppliers that could. We touch everything. Like we have our hands on it, but we don't actually hold licenses and everything else. So we let them do it, and we just oversee it.
So what was the first product you guys launched with? Because I know you have a bunch of products now, but
we launched. I mean, we keep it pretty lean. Like we do vape pens and pastilles. These candies are kind of our two main SKUs. I think,
and then you have a skincare line, right?
We have a skincare line also. Yeah, that was launched more recently, earlier this year.
Okay.
But in the beginning, it was just vapes and pastilles, and that was deliberate. I felt like that. Those two products would cover like pretty much, the demographic we wanted to. And, we started on pretty limited resources. So I didn't want to spread. I've seen a lot of businesses make the mistake of thinking having 12 products in the market is success. But I was like, I'd rather have just like one or two really strong ones and just move a lot.
And then we'll figure out how to scale later on.
Yeah, for sure. Like I don't need 27 different things out there.
So in terms of the early days of Beboe, like where was the idea even born from? Where did the audience come from? Because you definitely are tailored to a specific audience. What was that kind of discussion like early on?
I mean, I think obviously, Clem is, coming from the fashion world, is he's better than anyone I know in the world at selling people stuff they don't need. Like it's not
right.
Like this is not, this is not a brand. It's not a medical brand. It's a super fun, like warm and fuzzy recreational brand. So I hate focus groups. I hate market studies. I hate all that stuff. I think anything well designed is designed selfishly. So I basically made something for me. I wanted something that's good enough for me and good enough for my wife. And, I'm a high functioning adult who has a career and kids to raise. And, the biggest issue I have with what was on the market at the time is that everything was designed to get you just chain you to your sofa for 4 hours, which like, I don't have time to sit on I don't have time. Like I want a little warm and sparkly, but like
Pat and I were wondering the same thing the other day is how do people do that every day?
Dude, I mean, the fact that like, productive, people hand you a pot brownie and be like, "Oh, here's a brownie. It's awesome. It's 12 doses." It's like, well, give me 12 brownies. Don't give me one brownie that's 12 doses. Like who eats a 12th of a brownie?
Yeah.
But yeah, so we.
I've never eaten a 12th of a brownie, by the way.
Ever. It's impossible. You can't.
I barely eaten one brownie and stopped, but that's a whole different story.
But yeah, so we wanted something that was like very pedestrian friendly. Everyone has one of those pot brownie horror stories of eating too much. So like with our edibles, we wanted really low dosage, very precisely controlled. We wanted people's trust, and so, like we wanted, like when you have one of our candies, if you have, you know exactly what you're going to get. And,
what are you going to get?
With one of them, just little warm and fuzzy, just, like if you want to get high, eat 3, but just one is kind
like
of
chill.
Yeah. I mean, I can get into like, my relationship with weed and creative processes and creative theory and all that stuff. But as
why don't we do that? I mean, let's do it. I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't know why we weren't going to get into it.
I don't know. I
love it.
I'm trying to go easy on whoever's editing this, but yeah.
Well, don't worry, it's me, and I'm okay with it.
Okay. But the reason I think it's interesting is because, if anything, this is more educational, and I want people to hear about this side of the industry as opposed to all the negative stuff that's always out there, right?
Yeah.
And then they can make the judgment call on their own. I don't really care. But I think that as, Americans, human beings, whatever, we lack information. Like, we lack being informed before we make a decision,
or
which
just
is why we
true,
got to
honest
this whole point.
Recollections and experiences, right?
Yeah. So my relationship with, cannabis to me at this point is like an office supply. It's just like a creative tool. So any creative process, whether you're writing a book or making a painting, it incorporates 2 parts of your brain. You have your subconscious mind, which is where all the like abstract, gooey, like super romantic, emotional thought happens. Like that's where ideas are formed, but then you have your conscious mind, which is the one that is, pragmatic and rational, and it's responsible for taking this gooey abstract idea and rendering it in some sort of medium so that it can exist in the physical world. So basically, a lot of creatives, what they work on is having those 2 parts of your brain talk to each other. Like David Lynch. I don't know if you've read his Catching the Big Fish. He's super into meditation, and so he uses meditation to like calm his mind and really have his subconscious mind and conscious mind have a relationship where they talk to each other, and so he can have these like really fantastic ideas that would normally the moment they touch your conscious mind would be like, that's not possible. Like, put it away. That's not possible. Put it away. But like, if they really work with each other, then you can have these like crazy weirdo ideas and be like, let's try to make it possible. Let's try to render that. Let's try to write that story. Let's try to make that film. So, and anyway, like, so yeah, Lynch uses meditations. I remember reading about.
I've heard about like obviously a lot about like micro dosing and like people
Totally,
like Steve Jobs like actually dosing, not micro, like dosing,
like
full dosing.
Yeah.
I don't know, like I don't know if you've ever experimented with that stuff, but I wonder like how that. I know like a lot of creatives go that route too.
Similar thing. So like Thomas Edison, I always remembered he. I don't know if it's true or not, but I love the story where he would sit down late at night and he would have his table and his journal and his pencil. And then in his other hand, he would have a handful of marbles, and he would meditate on like inventions and problems. And eventually, he'd fall asleep. But then when he fell asleep, the marbles would fall out of his hand and hit the floor and wake him up. And so he'd pick the marbles back up and like keep meditating on the problem, and then fall asleep. And basically, he would just do that again and again. And that was a way of traversing that membrane of sleepfulness and wakefulness. Because like when like that lucid dreaming stage where your conscious and subconscious are talking to each other, and he would try to go back and forth through that moment as many times as possible where a lot of ideas would happen. So anyway, cannabis is really useful in that, where it just kind of helps, a little bit of weed where, it just helps quiet that part of your mind that is so quick to say that's not possible, so that these ideas can survive, your own self-criticism and come to fruition. And sometimes they're great, sometimes they're dumb, but at least they are born.
Right.
And so that's why I like having a little bit, having the dosage be very controlled and very mild, because too much, then you're like, I'm never gonna finish this thing. I'm already too high. But so it's so Beboe was designed basically for me, because I want to get a little sparkly, a little warm and fuzzy, but I still have shit to do.
Huh. And so at the time, like you couldn't find anything like that. It was kind of like up to the user.
It was like taking a gummy bear and just eating like 1 foot off a gummy bear, you know. And it's like,
no one's gonna do that.
Yeah. So yeah, but nothing was really. And also, I'm very careful about what I put in my body. Like I want. It's not like time is my most limited resource, not money. So if I have 2 opportunities a week to enjoy weed, I want the best possible. I don't have time for bad weed. I want the best premium. Like, I don't care how much it costs. I want the good shit.
Yeah.
And when did you get to that point? I'm curious.
I don't know. I mean, it's
because that's how I feel about food.
Oh yeah, no, food was early on. Like back when I was tattooing, I remember the day I was in New York, like working on the Lower East Side, like making. I mean, what then was decent money. Also, like my overhead, was $400 a month. Beautiful. But I remember the day I decided I'm not going to look at prices on menus anymore. Yeah. Or just like, I'm going to get what I want.
That's a big day.
And I'm not going to look at the price. It feels fucking amazing. Yeah. But similar to that, like, and then I just kind of transferred that to drugs, where I'm just like, I don't care how much it costs. I want what I want.
Yeah. And, I don't care what's going to happen with this thing. I'm just going to do it. Right. Like that's going back to like the, knocking off that one side of your brain that says like, don't do it. Or
like, so it's also like a quality standard. It wasn't just about low dosage. Like I want like quality. Premium quality. Yeah.
So I saw online that you guys are like the Hermès of weed. What makes you guys the Hermès of weed?
Well, the New York Times said it, and so it's true.
100%. End of answer. Please move on.
Yeah. I'm like, the New York Times said it, so I, like
who there smoked, who there enjoyed the product.
I know.
Well, I mean, you did mention like when you said design, you were kind of talking about how the actual like product was designed, but not like product. When I say product, like what's in
the
it,
functionality,
the functionality. No, but what about the actual external?
I mean, I think, I mean, I'm an aesthetic person. Like I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a wine shop and the manager will come up to me and be like, "Oh, what would you like?" And I'm like going to a dinner party. Like I want to get invited back again. What should I bring? And like, what are you eating for dinner? Okay, here's what you should get. And they'll point out some bottle of wine and they'll be like, this is the best bottle of wine in the whole store. It's only $20. This is my recommendation. You should buy this. I'm like, great, thank you. And then they walk away, and I look at it, and I'm like, I can't show up with this font. You know what I mean? Like, this is like this is like the most horrible label design I've ever seen. And I'll put it back, and I'll buy whatever looks good and cost $80. And so I just like, I'm an aesthetic person. I don't like, maybe I'm judging, but I also think there is a real vetting process, especially, with cannabis. A lot of people are new to weed. And so when they go into a store and they look at the landscape of products out there, if there's one thing that is very thoughtfully put together and considered, you can tell that like I might not know weed,
Right.
but I can tell whoever made this is proud of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a very like if they put this much thought and consideration to the exterior, there's at least that much put into what
it's not just like they're not just trying to grab money off the top and just
so
like
totally.
you know,
It's you know what I mean. Like I do think aesthetic and presentation and the consideration is a vetting process when people are approaching something that they're unfamiliar with and they're deciding whether or not they want to trust it.
And not sure if they're competitors, but the other day that happened to me where I saw like this packaging and it was beautiful, and I was like, "What is this?" Like, because you don't know what it is.
Like, I'll take it.
And it was Lowell Smokes, and it was
they're
that,
awesome.
It was like that collaboration with Biggie's son, whose name is slipping my mind right now.
CJ Wallace, maybe.
CJ Wallace, there you go. And I was like, this is beautiful. And then my friend that I was with brought out like an ashtray, and I was like, wow, that's beautiful too. Yeah. And I'm like, you don't even see products like that in just any other like category.
Yeah.
Like this is like a legitimate brand. And when we were looking it up the other day, it was like they started in what, like 1905?
Yeah.
Some crazy shit
I don't know
like
if you knew that. They're like a really old
like
company.
Pre-California banning marijuana and then
and then
unbanning it.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's a great point. Like, even with the wine industry or food or anything, like we like judge with our eyes. Like we look with our eyes. And I think the best example of that.
First impression, right?
Yeah. We had
just be like, oh, I relate to that.
On episode 6, like early on, we had Nick Ingersoll from Barnana, and he's like their CMO, but their design guy. It's like a snack brand, and he said like there's just things that human beings consider like objectively beautiful.
Yeah,
like you're looking at it like, oh, that's beautiful.
I think he redoes their packaging like every month. Every time I see like his Instagram story, it's like a new design for it, and they're like banana chips and like banana snacks. But he really like dedicated. And, he's that kind of guy too. But
what is the feedback you've gotten from folks that have purchased this product or that are users of Beboe?
I mean, I think normally people know I'm the founder, so they usually don't tell me that they don't like it.
But Scott.
But our kind of like, we should actually have it like written on the wall somewhere here, is that like our blanket feedback is like when people see it, they're like, oh yeah, like my wife loves that stuff. Like across the board, everybody's like, oh yeah, that's the stuff my wife really loves. And I love that. I mean, it wasn't deliberately targeted towards women, but my wife was definitely like a muse in its creation, and I always would bounce ideas off her, and I was like, if it's like I was like, I want to make something good enough for my wife. And I think in most households the wife is the more discriminating consumer, so the fact that the wives approve of it is a big badge of honor.
And it's been how long since you first launched?
We launched 2017, March 2017.
Couple years, give or take.
2.5 years.
So
in
those 2 years, like, what's been the most challenging thing aside from kind of the stuff that people already know, like with regulations and things like that? Like, has there been anything that's like you weren't really sure that would happen, and then you just like, holy shit, I wasn't expecting this?
All of it. Yeah, really.
Everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of
such a new space, right?
Yeah, it's such a new space that it like everything is speculative. It started out like, yeah, let's do it, let's try it, let's see. And yeah, as soon as people when I started seeing it around or hearing about it, and I didn't bring it up, it was when it's like, oh, this is a thing, like people would be like, when I'd go somewhere, my wife would be like, oh, he has this brand Beboe, and they're like, and they know of it before they know of me, like it's, that was when I started realizing like, oh, this is a thing. It might actually work. But now it's, like we just merged with this larger company. They have licensing in 12 states, vertical operations. So now it's like very quickly becoming a national brand, which is exciting.
Let's talk about that. I mean, like, how did that whole thing come about? Like, were you actively trying to get it to that level and sell, or were you just
I mean, I have the luxury of being the creative end, and my partner Clem dealt with all the
M&A
song
stuff.
and dance with investors, and fundraising and all that. I mean, I would have to do my song and dance to basically, like, if you saw us sitting next to each other, it's very clear which hemisphere of the brain we each represent. Where it's like, he's the pragmatic Asian that makes sure everything works okay, and I'm the like emotional, creative weirdo. But because no one would loan me that much money without him sitting next to me. But he kind of legitimized everything. But yeah, so it was exciting. I mean, we knew we didn't want to have to keep raising money on our own. You know, like our intent was very much to establish a name and a reputation here in California, because California is kind of the crystal ball for what cannabis will be nationally, and then partner up with a multi-state operation. And we sat down at the table with, you know, every company that was sizable enough to do what we wanted to do with it and to scale us. And GTI was just by far the best cultural fit. You know, they really, I just like their philosophy, because I feel like there's so many in the weed space. There's all these like fucking tech and hedge fund guys who are trying to plan like a 2-year exit. You know, they want to just like buy it, flip it, get the evaluation up, and like be done with it in 2 years. And
well, what that says is that they're not very optimistic about the future of the space, right?
Yeah,
they're not long.
Like,
they're very short.
But I'm old school. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have a bank account till I was 35. You know, I just had a mattress full of cash. Like I want to build a cash positive business and grow it. You know, I don't want to just like take on all this debt to scale and then try to get the valuation up to catch up to our debt. And like, it's just like all that. I was like, no, I want something concrete where it's like, we just build it organically. And I really like GTI's kind of philosophy and mindset was very much about the long game. You know, it's not about this like slash and burn, you know, mentality. And I really appreciated that, you know, because
What's the transition been like, in your words, to like a real job, where you're coming in, you're answering to people are asking you questions, you're leading them, guiding them, mentoring them to grow a company? I mean, what is? I mean, it's obviously a massive change.
It is, you know, because like when we, you know, here in LA, in the LA office, we've got, like I said, like 22 people working here. You know, I have the time and bandwidth to touch everything. You know, like every Monday we sit down and we all talk about what we're doing this week, what's the state of sales, what's marketing doing, what's production doing, you know, and I can touch everything. Whereas now it's the first time it's gotten to the point where I can't touch everything. Like I have to let go, and we have to kind of divide and conquer. Where it's like, all right, I'm going to stay over here because now we're launching the skincare line with, you know, Beboe therapies and putting that out there. So it's, you know, it's kind of, I imagine it's a similar feeling to sending your kids off to college, where it's like, you just got to have faith, you know, you're like, I've raised them the best I could. Like, you know, like go do it. You know,
Is that a scary thought for you?
No, I mean, it's what we always wanted, you know what I mean? Like it was, you know, it's what we've been working towards, but yeah, I mean, it's an adjustment not being able to touch everything myself. But I still touch as much as I can.
I'm sure there's a lot of work still to be done, like at this point. Like at what point, like how long do you think until like we see just kind of walking on the street like every other person like with one of these pens, or like?
I mean, I think it's, you know, like when it's federally flips, that'll be the biggest and kind of final hurdle to fall, because right now it's still,
and then it's just going to be like everyone out the gate, huh? It's just going to be like,
I don't know. I mean, the thing that will really change is that banks can take money. I mean, I've had you know, our bank account's been shut down 10 times.
Yeah,
you know,
processing's a big
get the call,
hurdle,
and we'll just be like, hey, we can't have your money anymore. You got 24 hours to get it out. So we're like so many times.
What they call like high risk? Is that what the high risk process?
You know, like we've been walking around town with a cashier's check with our entire funding in it, like trying to find.
You feel like an actual drug dealer, right?
Yeah. I was like, okay, it does still feel a bit illicit.
Yeah.
That's where blockchain comes in.
There you go.
But you know, you know, with my team and everything here, you know, we definitely get frustrated with the hurdles of like payment processing for CBD. But you know, I have to always remind myself and everybody else, be like, look, it's a pain in the ass. But that pain in the ass is the reason why Anheuser-Busch isn't allowed to come in here. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like that, it's this awkward gray area and all its complications is an opportunity for people like us to gain market share.
I'm glad you bring that up, because that is something that I've definitely wondered, is like once it is federally legal and like now everyone's free, you know, free for all. Yeah. What happens when all these big brands start introducing their like brand names, like people have been in this business for like hundreds of years.
Businesses like us,
they're gonna get bought
you know,
out.
by that time, you know, like are sizable enough that they can't be ignored or steamrolled.
Right. Like you've built a strong enough brand.
Customers are educated to the point where they're like, oh, I'm not going to buy the Nestle brand weed. I'm going to buy, this mom and pop version and like be loyal to them. And, and yeah, so it's, like it's a pain in the ass, this weird gray area, but it's the only reason why people like us can make moves. Yeah.
And I think, Pat, there's like two answers to that. I think one is, in my opinion, these mom pop shops that actually have some market share are going to be acquired by those bigger brands and operate as their own. Like they're not going to become.
My opinion is going to be less than we think.
Sorry,
less brands are going to be acquired than we think.
I don't think so.
I think the ones like obviously Beboe and like the ones that have like
to be honest,
built a brand.
We're already at a moment now where things are rolling up and different. You know what I mean? Like basically, even at this moment in the California market, if a brand hasn't aligned themselves with one of the bigger groups, like it's going to be rough.
Like going back to why I asked,
price point wise and everything, and like just efficiency of scale,
and the distribution that those guys have,
right? Exactly. So that's why I asked. Like, did you think it was the right choice to not buy the farm back in the day? And obviously, personally for you, it was. But what my thought process was like, once these big brands start coming in, they're most likely going to private label this stuff and white label it, and then the winners are going to be the ones who are like manufacturing it, right? Not the small brands who are like buying from the same farms.
Yeah, I mean the brands will be. I don't know because it's going to be interesting because even though it's nationally legal, there's and I'm not the expert on this, but a lot even though it's federally legal, I think states. Everyone's talking like states will you still won't be able to cross state lines with it,
right?
Because
there's going to be like
states have
local
already invested in their own infrastructure, and they're not going to want to give that money away. You know what I mean? Like so, it's. Because otherwise, then California is just going to supply the whole country with weed, and then Colorado is going to be like, "Wait a minute, we just built all these businesses." So I think there will still be.
Well, there's definitely there's going to be constitutional issues in terms of the Commerce Clause there because they need to be open between state lines.
Right, but even alcohol, every state has its own alcohol board. Like
like Massachusetts closes on Sunday or like a certain time on Sunday.
Yeah,
or something
and then
like
everything has to go because I know like I have a wine brand and dealing with Southern Wine and Spirits where it's like I have to market to each state. Like I have to go and market to the gatekeepers in Pennsylvania in order to sell my wine in Pennsylvania, and then I have to go. So
there's federal laws and then there's like local laws and state laws and
like even when it federally flips, there will still be some gates between states. It's not going to be that simple as like, it'll still be complicated, but I think it'll be a lot easier. And
I guess let's change the topic and we'll finish up on this. I know I brought it up earlier. Being a dad.
Yeah.
Being a dad, husband.
The best pain in the ass ever.
Really? Yeah. When was it? When did you become a father? When did you get married? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, let's see. I met my wife in 2011. May 11th, 2011, we met our first date.
Day before my birthday.
Day before his birthday. There you go.
Yeah, I wasn't born in 2011,
May 12th?
Yeah,
May 13th.
May 28th.
Nice.
But you guys are Tauruses.
Yeah.
Fuck. It's okay. I have a twin personality, so we're equal out. 2-2.
But yeah, I met my wife in 2011, got married 2013, and had kids shortly thereafter. And it's the best. All the cliches are true. Like it's hard. My wife and I both have, full-blown careers that we're very passionate about. But I sat down with her and I was like, okay, look, like, do we, obviously the thing that's scary about having kids is not dirty diapers or lack of sleep. What's truly terrifying about having kids is loving something with that magnitude of love that is vulnerable, and it's terrifying that I am no longer the most important thing in my life, that that the priorities of my life had left my body and entered this other body. And so but I sat down with my wife and I was like, it's scary and we need to make a decision together. Do we want to know what that magnitude of love feels like? Like in my lifetime, what do I want? Like, do I want to stay in the shallow end and like great, sleep 8 hours a night and not ever have to be that terrified of
but to go deeper, like what are the what are the consequences of that? Like what is that?
Well, that's what I mean. Like we just decided that like, yeah, like I want to know, like I want to get on that roller coaster. I want higher highs and I want lower lows.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I want to turn that page and I want to know what it is. And I want to be as young as possible when I do. And today's as young as I'm going to get, you know? So we were just like, fuck it. Let's do it. So yeah, so we had one kid and we were one and done. We're like, great. It's a miracle. She's perfect. Let's do it. And then, you know, had a second one too.
It's like tattoos, right?
Yeah.
You
Well,
can't
I
just
mean,
have
the
one.
second one wasn't, I wouldn't call it deliberate, but yeah, I mean, she won't take off her pants till I get a vasectomy now. But no, it's great. You know, it gives me a reason. Like there's a lot of growing up that I would never do for myself, that once my kids showed up, I was like, okay, I'll grow up for you.
Yeah.
You know, like I
Did you feel that change like immediately?
for sure. Everything that like you guys are the reasons why you guys are here interviewing me for a podcast, I've accomplished all that since having kids. You know, like the idea of like once you have kids, like you're, you know, that's it, you're done. You know, like I mean, I remember, you know, as an artist, you know, like I was nervous about having kids because I thought that it would put financial pressures on my work that would force me to dilute the integrity of my work, where it's like, I'm just going to have to make money. You know, like I'm going to have to crank out artwork to pay the bills. And, you know, people will look at my life's work later on and be like, this is what he made before he had kids. And this is what he made after, you know, but I was like, I accept that. Like I accept the financial pressure and the possible, you know, sacrificing of integrity in my work. I want to know what that love feels like. And it was a couple months before my first kid was born. And I remember I woke up from a dream in which I dreamt I had died before she was born. And there was this like 12-year-old girl going through my studio, looking at all the stuff in my studio, trying to figure out who her dad was. And, you know, because all she knew of me was this work that I had left behind. And I distinctly remember waking up and being like, I don't give a fuck about the money. I don't give a fuck about anything. I'm never making anything that isn't sincere again. Like I'm never, you know what I mean? Like, whereas I thought the pressure would be applied financially, the pressure actually was like, I have to be sincere. Because everything that I make from this moment forward, that little girl has to be able to happen upon at my studio and be like, my fucking dad made that, you know?
Why isn't that like an ad campaign for Beboe? Like
I don't know that makes
like
you want to buy drugs. I think that's like a campaign for babies.
I mean, I don't know what it's a
Hey,
campaign
just flip
for.
it upside down.
yeah.
It just
Yeah,
might
I mean,
work.
just
Just
different
might
branding
work.
on it every time. Whoever wants to,
Yeah.
whatever you perceive it as.
But it
it'll be a
really
great
was.
ad.
But I was like, it was a relief to know that, like, yes, it did put a lot more pressure on me, but not in the way I thought. You know, like it made me to be more sincere, not necessarily more lucrative.
What do you consider your life's mission, like your life's why, your life's purpose?
Well, that's it. I mean, now it's like now I have kids. It's just my life purpose is just create a safe place for them to jump off of and enjoy watching them jump off. That's pretty much it.
Love it. Well, hey, man, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm so glad we did this and got to meet you and hear your
thanks for taking
story.
time.
And excited to see where things go with you, things go with Beboe. We'll be there supporting. And it's been great, man.
Thanks, Scott.